What if curiosity wasn't just harmless? What if one small question had the power to change everything? My story isn't about love. It's about the razor-thin line between desire and regret. They say curiosity killed the cat. Well, for me, curiosity didn't kill me, but it did change my life forever. Thanks for being an amazing supporter. If you're excited for more stories, subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Let's dive into this tale together. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to question her marriage, let alone betray it. I was married to Ethan, a good man by every measure. He was loving, dependable, and hardworking. The kind of husband many women would dream of. But sometimes, even in the best marriages, a sense of monotony creeps in. It's not about being unhappy, just unfulfilled. It started with a tiny, almost laughable thought. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled across an article titled, "Does size really matter?" I rolled my eyes at the obvious clickbait but couldn't resist. Curiosity got the better of me, and before I knew it, I was reading through the piece. As I scanned the words, I found myself wondering about my own life, my own marriage. Ethan and I had been together for over 10 years. While our intimacy was steady, it had never been explosive or earth-shattering. He was comforting, reliable, and yes, average in every sense of the word, including in ways I had never previously given much thought to, until that moment. That article planted a seed in my mind. It wasn't that I was unhappy or even dissatisfied with Ethan. It was the not knowing that gnawed at me. What if size did matter? What if I'd been missing out on something profound without even realizing it? That single question simmered in the back of my mind for weeks. It became a quiet, persistent hum, growing louder every time I found myself alone with my thoughts. It wasn't something I could discuss with Ethan. How do you even bring up something like that with the man you love, the man who trusts you completely? The guilt of even entertaining such thoughts weighed heavily on me. But no matter how much I told myself to stop, the curiosity only grew stronger. One night after Ethan had gone to bed, I found myself opening my phone and typing questions into a search engine, questions I never thought I'd ask. Stories, forums, and anonymous confessions appeared, each one more revealing than the last. It felt like opening Pandora's box. Women shared their experiences, their secrets, their regrets. Many insisted that size made a difference, not just physically but emotionally. I felt a strange cocktail of guilt and excitement as I read. Was it wrong to wonder? Was it wrong to want to know? Eventually, wondering wasn't enough. I told myself it was purely for research, just to satisfy my curiosity, nothing more. I created an anonymous profile on a discreet dating site. I didn't use a photo of myself, just a vague description of what I was looking for. It felt thrilling in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The moment I submitted the profile, messages started pouring in. Men of all types introduced themselves, some with crude comments, others with polite charms. But I had only one criterion. I was searching for someone who fit the description of what I was curious about. And then I found him. His name was Ryan. He was in his early 30s, with a confident smile and a physique that matched his photos. He was charming, flirty, but respectful. He wasn't afraid to address the very thing I was curious about, bold but not overbearing. I found myself smiling at his messages, my heart racing as our conversation deepened. He lived about an hour away in San Diego and seemed genuinely interested in meeting. He never pushed, never made me feel cheap. Instead, he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. This is insane, I thought to myself. What am I doing? But no amount of self-reproach could stop me. I told myself it would be just once. Just to see. Just to know. I had no idea how that single decision would spiral into something far greater than I could control. The day I agreed to meet Ryan, I told Ethan I was meeting an old friend for coffee. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did plan on having coffee, just not with a friend. Ryan and I had decided to meet at a small, quiet hotel on the outskirts of Los Angeles. It wasn't shady, but it wasn't extravagant either, just anonymous enough to feel safe. As I drove there, my stomach churned with nerves. I had already crossed the line the moment I created that profile. But meeting him in person? This was something else entirely. This was a betrayal I could never undo. When I arrived, Ryan was already waiting for me in the lobby. He was taller than I'd imagined, with broad shoulders and an easy smile that immediately put me at ease. He walked toward me, casual and confident, as if we were old friends meeting after years apart. "You made it," he said, his voice warm and smooth. I nodded, too nervous to speak. My mind screamed at me to turn around to leave before I did something I couldn't take back. But my body stayed rooted in place, drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. We didn't waste much time. Ryan had already booked a room. As we stepped inside, a wave of guilt washed over me. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, a silent reminder of the promises I was about to shatter. "This is your last chance to back out," Ryan said softly, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. But only for a moment. "I want this," I whispered. Saying it out loud made it feel real. Terrifyingly real. The next few hours were a blur. Ryan was everything I had read about and more. Confident, attentive, skillful in ways I had never experienced. He made me feel things I didn't know I was capable of feeling. For the first time in my life, I felt a kind of pleasure that was almost overwhelming. When it was over, we lay there in silence. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. I had gotten my answer. But at what cost? Guilt, satisfaction, excitement, and shame all tangled together in a chaotic mess. Ryan turned to me, his hand tracing lazy circles on my arm. "Was it worth it?" he asked, his voice soft. I couldn't look at him. Instead, I nodded, biting my lip to keep from crying. It had been worth it, and that was the most terrifying part. I had risked everything for one afternoon, and I knew deep down that I would do it again. As I drove home through the streets of Los Angeles, I replayed every moment in my mind, comparing it to the years I'd spent with Ethan. It wasn't just the physical difference, it was the way Ryan had made me feel. Alive, desired, and free. When I walked through the door, Ethan greeted me with his usual warmth. "How was coffee?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. "It was nice," I lied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. That night, as I lay in bed next to Ethan, I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. The curiosity that had driven me to this point had transformed into something else entirely. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something far more dangerous. I was hooked. The morning after my second meeting with Ryan, I woke up feeling like a completely different person. There was no turning back now. What had started as simple curiosity had grown into something much bigger, something far more dangerous. Every time I looked at Ethan's trusting face, my stomach twisted with guilt. And yet, no amount of guilt could overpower the pull Ryan had over me. Ethan remained blissfully unaware. He was too absorbed in work and the routines of our life to notice the changes in me. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I made a conscious effort to be extra attentive at home. Cooking his favorite meals, asking about his day, showing affection. It was almost like I was overcompensating for the guilt that weighed heavily on my heart. Ethan thought I was just being sweet, never suspecting that my attentiveness was hiding something much darker. But the truth was, my thoughts were consumed by Ryan. Every text message he sent made my heart race. Every memory of his touch and kiss replayed in my mind when I lay next to Ethan at night. I started craving Ryan. Not just physically but emotionally. It wasn't just about the excitement Ryan brought into my life. It was the contrast. With Ryan I felt wanted, adventurous, and alive. With Ethan I felt safe but unchallenged. I convinced myself that it was only natural to want both. The stability of my marriage and the passion Ryan provided. The lies came easier with time. Errands, gym sessions, lunch dates with friends. Each became a convenient alibi to explain my absences. Every lie I told was delivered with a convincing smile that Ethan never questioned, which made it all too easy. I hated lying to him. I hated the person I was becoming. But the truth was, I didn't want to stop. Ryan had awakened something in me that I couldn't ignore. Ryan, for his part, never pushed me for more than I was willing to give. He didn't ask about Ethan, didn't pry into my life outside of our time together. That made it easier to compartmentalize what we had. When I was with him, it felt like stepping into an alternate world. One where my responsibilities, guilt, and the weight of my marriage didn't exist. The more time I spent with him, the more I understood why I couldn't stop. It wasn't just about the physical connection, although that was undeniably a part of it. It was how he made me feel. Seen. Ryan brought out a side of me I hadn't known was there. With him, I wasn't just Ethan's wife or a homemaker. I was a woman. Vibrant. Alive. daring. Then one evening, after yet another afternoon with Ryan, I came home to find Ethan waiting for me. He had cooked dinner. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said with a warm smile. In that moment, the weight of what I was doing hit me like a freight train. Here was my husband, the man who had stood by me through everything, the man who still looked at me as though I was the most important person in the world. And here I was, betraying him again and again. I kissed him on the cheek and thanked him, forcing myself to push Ryan out of my mind. That night I resolved to stop, to end things with Ryan once and for all. But the very next week I was back in his arms. The addiction was stronger than my guilt, stronger than the love I still had for Ethan. Every time I told myself it would be the last time, I ended up right back where I started. Ryan didn't demand anything from me, but he wasn't oblivious either. "You keep saying this is the last time," he teased one afternoon as we lay tangled in the sheets. I laughed weakly, but there was no humor in it. "It's complicated," I said finally. "Life always is," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from my face. The truth was, I didn't want to stop. The thought of giving Ryan up felt like cutting off a part of myself. That's what it felt like. But deep down I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. The lies were piling up, and sooner or later something would give. For now, though, I pushed those thoughts aside. I wasn't ready to face the consequences. Not yet. My life became a carefully orchestrated performance, a balancing act I never thought I was capable of. To Ethan, I was still the loving, dependable wife. I laughed at his jokes, planned our meals, and kept our life together running as seamlessly as ever. But beneath that polished surface, I was unraveling. Ryan had become an addiction I couldn't resist. It wasn't just the physical thrill, though that was undeniable. It was the way he made me feel. When I was with him, I wasn't just Ethan's wife or some woman going through the motions of a predictable life. I was vibrant, daring, utterly consumed by the allure of something forbidden. Ethan never suspected a thing. His trust in me was absolute, and that made my actions feel even more surreal. It was as though my double life existed in a separate reality, one that never touched the safe, stable bubble of my marriage. Ryan and I started meeting more often. Our stolen moments became the highlight of my week. Every time we were together, it was like stepping into a dream. And every time I returned to Ethan, it was like waking up to reality. But dreams don't last forever. One afternoon, as Ryan and I lay together in a quiet hotel room, he turned to me with an intensity in his eyes that made my chest tighten. "You know this can't last forever, right?" he said softly. The word startled me. "What do you mean?" I asked, propping myself up on one elbow. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "I know you love your husband. I'm not trying to mess with that. But you can't keep splitting yourself in two like this." I swallowed hard, his words cutting through the haze I'd been living in. He was right. As much as I wanted to pretend I could keep both worlds separate forever, I knew I was playing with fire. Ryan reached for my hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You've got to figure out what you want, Claire. I'm not saying this to push you away, but you can't keep walking this tightrope. It's going to snap eventually." His words lingered long after I left that day. For the first time, I couldn't brush away the guilt and pretend everything was fine. I loved Ethan. I really did. But Ryan had shown me something I hadn't even known I was missing. That night, as I lay in bed next to Ethan, I couldn't sleep. I watched him breathe, his face soft and peaceful in the dim light. He had no idea about the storm raging inside me. I thought about everything Ryan had given me: passion, excitement, the thrill of something new. But I also thought about what I stood to lose. Ethan wasn't just my husband. He was my partner, my best friend, the man who had built a life with me. I couldn't risk losing that. I wouldn't. The next morning I made a decision. I met Ryan one last time, the weight of my choice pressing down on me the entire drive. When I walked into the room, Ryan greeted me with his usual charm, but there was a knowing look in his eyes. "This is it, isn't it?" he asked softly. I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Ryan. I love my husband. I love my life. I can't keep risking it." Ryan didn't argue or try to change my mind. He simply reached out and took my hand. "I get it," he said. "And for what it's worth, I hope you find everything you're looking for." I smiled through my tears, grateful for his understanding. Saying goodbye to him felt like letting go of a part of myself, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Driving home that day, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had found the answer to the question that started it all. Did passion and excitement matter? Yes, but they weren't everything. What mattered more was the life I had built with Ethan, the love and trust we shared. When I walked through the door, Ethan was there, smiling as he always did. I hugged him tightly, burying my face in his chest and breathing in his familiar scent. "What's this for?" he asked, laughing softly. "Just because," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I knew I had made the right choice. Ryan had shown me something about myself, something I hadn't known I needed. But in the end, my family, my marriage, and the life I had with Ethan were worth more than any fleeting temptation. It wasn't easy to walk away, and the memories of Ryan would likely linger for a long time. But I had made my decision. My curiosity had nearly cost me everything, but it had also reminded me of what truly mattered. Ethan didn't need to know the truth. I would carry that burden alone. All he needed to know was that I loved him, and that was enough for me.